It is 3 a.m. and you're wide awake replaying something embarrassing you said at a dinner party in 2019. You were almost asleep, and then your brain decided it was the right moment to rerun that specific memory in full detail. Not a threat, not something you need to solve, something that is completely over, completely irrelevant, and completely mortifying. And your brain is playing it on loop. This happens to almost every person on Earth. It has a biological mechanism, and that mechanism is not insomnia. This is brain glitch. And today we are covering why your brain targets you with your own worst memories at the exact moment you're trying to sleep. What system is responsible, why it activates at night specifically, and why some people experience this far more intensely than others. The standard explanation is that you are just anxious, or that you think too much, or that you need to clear your head before bed. That explanation is incomplete in a way that matters. Because the system running this process is not the part of your brain that controls anxiety, it is a memory consolidation system that operates specifically during sleep transitions. And it was built to do exactly this, not to torture you, to protect you. The problem is that it is using a threat detection algorithm that was calibrated for a world that no longer exists. Before we get into the mechanism, one data point that establishes how universal this is. A 2013 study published in the journal Psychological Science found that negative emotional memories are recalled with significantly greater clarity and detail than neutral or positive ones, across all age groups, all cultures, and regardless of sleep quality. This is not a personality trait. This is a feature of how human memory storage works. Your brain does not treat all memories equally. It applies a tagging system, and the tags that trigger the strongest storage signal are negative emotion, social threat, and unresolved outcome. A dinner party comment that landed wrong hits all three simultaneously. It was socially threatening, it produced negative emotion, and the outcome, what the other person thought of you afterward, was never fully resolved. Your brain flagged that memory for priority processing, and priority processing happens at night. There is a system in your brain called the default mode network, the DMN, which is a set of interconnected regions that becomes most active when you're not focused on an external task. When you stop doing something and let your mind wander, the DMN switches on. When you lie down to sleep, your external task load drops to 0. The DMN activates fully. And one of its primary functions is to review unresolved emotional content, to process, categorize, and attempt to integrate experiences that carry unresolved charge. The dinner party memory is unresolved emotional content, so the DMN serves it up, not randomly, not out of cruelty, because your brain has identified it as something that still needs to be processed. The question is why the system runs at 3 a.m. specifically, why it tends to escalate rather than resolve, and why some memories return night after night for years. The answer to all three involves a second system that runs in parallel, one that the DMN interacts with during sleep in a way that is counterintuitive and almost never explained. That system is what we are covering now. There's a specific reason this happens at night and not during the day, and it is not what most people assume. The assumption is that nighttime is when you are less distracted, so difficult thoughts have more space to surface. That is true, but it is the surface explanation. The real reason is structural. It involves two brain systems that operate in opposition during the day and lose that opposition at night. The first system is the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational evaluation, context, and emotional regulation. During the day, it acts as a filter. When the amygdala, your brain's threat detection center, flags a memory as emotionally significant, the prefrontal cortex steps in. It evaluates the threat level. It provides context. It reduces the emotional charge enough for you to function normally. This is why you can think about an embarrassing moment during the day without it taking over. The prefrontal cortex is doing active regulatory work in real time, dampening the amygdala's signal so you can continue processing the rest of your environment. It is doing this constantly, automatically, and without your awareness. Every time an uncomfortable memory surfaces during the day, and you are able to set it aside, that is the prefrontal amygdala regulatory circuit working exactly as intended. The architecture only breaks down when the prefrontal cortex goes offline. And at night, it does. This is why you can think about an embarrassing moment during the day and not spiral. The prefrontal cortex is doing its job. At night, as you move towards sleep, prefrontal cortex activity drops significantly. The filter goes offline. The amygdala, now without its regulatory counterpart, processes emotional memories at full intensity. The dinner party comment was flagged by your amygdala weeks or months ago as socially threatening and unresolved. It has been waiting. The moment the filter goes offline, it moves to the front of the queue. This is not a bug, it is the intended architecture. Your brain runs its emotional processing backlog during sleep transitions, because that is the only time the regulatory systems are quiet enough for the processing to happen. The problem is that the processing is supposed to resolve the emotional charge over time. Under chronic stress, it does not. There's a second layer to why the 3 a.m. phenomenon is so consistent across people. In 2002, researchers at Harvard Medical School published a study in the journal Science showing that emotional memories, specifically memories tagged by the amygdala as high priority, are preferentially consolidated during REM sleep compared to neutral memories. This is called sleep-dependent emotional memory consolidation. Your brain does not just store memories during sleep, it selectively strengthens the ones that carry the most emotional weight. And the ones it strengthens most are the ones your amygdala has flagged as unresolved threats. So not only does the dinner party memory surface at night because the prefrontal filter is offline, it surfaces because your brain is actively working on it, trying to process and file it correctly. The frustrating part is that this process is supposed to reduce the emotional charge over time. Each night of good REM sleep should make the memory feel slightly less acute than the night before. Under chronic stress, it does not work that way. And the reason why takes us directly into the mechanism, into what is actually happening in your brain between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., why the amygdala peaks at exactly that window, and why some memories return for years despite hundreds of intervening nights of sleep. The 2002 Harvard study also established something else that matters here. Emotional memory consolidation during REM is not simply storage. It is active reprocessing. The brain is not filing the memory away unchanged. It is attempting to modify the emotional weight attached to it while keeping the factual content intact. This is why time and sleep, under normal conditions, genuinely make painful memories feel less acute. It is not a figure of speech. It is a documented biological process. What disrupts that process, and what keeps the 3 a.m. replay active night after night, is the exact same mechanism we covered in the previous video. The cortisol connection is direct, documented, and more specific than most people realize. That is what Block 2 covers now. The second system is the amygdala, a small almond-shaped cluster of neurons in the temporal lobe that functions as your brain's threat detection and emotional tagging center. Think of the amygdala as the editor who decides which memories get highlighted, which get stored in high resolution, and which get filed away in low detail. When something happens that the amygdala flags as emotionally significant, threatening, shameful, dangerous, or unresolved, it sends a signal that increases the strength of the memory trace being stored. The stronger the amygdala signal, the higher the resolution of the stored memory. This is why you can remember exactly where you were sitting, what you were wearing, and the precise expression on someone's face during a moment of social humiliation, but cannot remember what you ate for lunch 3 days ago. The amygdala decided one of those events mattered. Now here is where the night timing becomes clear. During the day, your prefrontal cortex, the rational planning part of your brain, exerts regulatory control over the amygdala. It acts as a dampener. When the amygdala flags something as threatening, the prefrontal cortex can evaluate whether the threat is real, contextualize it, and reduce the emotional charge. This is what allows you to think about the dinner party comment during the day without spiraling. The prefrontal cortex steps in and says, "This is not a current threat. This is a past event. You're safe." At night, as you transition towards sleep, prefrontal cortex activity drops significantly. The regulatory dampener goes offline. The amygdala, operating without its usual inhibition, processes emotional memories with full intensity. A 2011 study by Matthew Walker and colleagues at UC Berkeley found that sleep deprivation specifically impairs prefrontal regulation of the amygdala, and that sleep-deprived subjects showed 60% greater amygdala reactivity to negative emotional stimuli than rested controls. That number works in both directions. When you sleep poorly because your amygdala is replaying stressful memories, the resulting sleep deprivation makes your amygdala even more reactive the following night, which makes the memories more intense, which makes sleep harder, which increases amygdala reactivity. This is the loop that explains why people who go through a stressful period often find that the intrusive memories do not resolve when the stressor is removed. The sleep disruption has made the amygdala more sensitive, which sustains the cycle independently of the original cause. Here's the layer that almost never gets discussed. The default mode network and the amygdala do not just run in parallel during sleep transitions, they interact. Research published in 2016 in the journal Nature Neuroscience showed that during REM sleep, the stage associated with dreaming, which occurs in concentrated bursts between approximately 90 minutes and 4 hours after sleep onset, the amygdala becomes more active than at almost any other point in the day. REM sleep is not rest for your emotional brain. REM sleep is the shift where your emotional brain works hardest. And what it is doing during that shift is running your flagged, unresolved high-priority memories through a reprocessing sequence, attempting to strip the emotional charge from the content while preserving the informational content. Think of it like this. The memory of the dinner party comment is stored in 2 layers, the factual content of what happened and the emotional charge attached to it. The amygdala's job during REM sleep is to separate those 2 layers, to keep the information and reduce the distress signal. When this process works correctly, you remember the event, but feel less acute emotion about it over time. This is called emotional memory consolidation, and it is why most embarrassing memories feel less raw after a few nights of good sleep. When this process is disrupted by stress, by cortisol, by anything that interferes with REM, the memory gets reprocessed incompletely. The emotional charge does not reduce. So the amygdala flags it for reprocessing again the following night, and the night after that. This is exactly what was covered in the DIA 1 video, because cortisol, which remains elevated during chronic stress, directly suppresses REM sleep architecture. A 2007 study published in Sleep found that elevated evening cortisol was associated with reduced REM duration and increased nighttime awakenings. The stress from the day produces cortisol. The cortisol disrupts REM. The disrupted REM fails to process the emotional memories. The unprocessed memories return the following night with full emotional charge. The returning memories elevate stress. The elevated stress produces more cortisol. Your body is running software that hasn't been updated in 200,000 years. And that software was never designed for a world where the threats are abstract, ongoing, and unresolvable, because in that world, the reprocessing loop never gets a chance to complete. Here is the plot twist. The 3 a.m. timing is not random. REM sleep occurs in cycles across the night, with each cycle lasting approximately 90 minutes. The first REM cycle is short, approximately 10 minutes. Each subsequent cycle is longer. The longest and most intense REM periods occur in the final 2 hours of a full night's sleep, which, for someone sleeping from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., falls between approximately 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. This is why intrusive memories and anxiety tend to peak in the early morning hours, rather than immediately after falling asleep. You're hitting the most emotionally intense phase of the sleep cycle. The amygdala is at maximum activity. The prefrontal dampener is fully offline. And the memory your brain has flagged as highest priority is the one getting processed first. Here's what the science does not yet fully explain. We know that REM sleep processes emotional memories. We know that cortisol disrupts REM. We know that the amygdala drives the reprocessing sequence. What remains unclear is why certain memories persist through years of apparently successful reprocessing, returning decades later with acute emotional charge intact, despite hundreds of intervening REM cycles. Some researchers believe this involves memory reconsolidation, a process by which recalled memories are briefly made unstable and must be restabilized, during which they can either be weakened or strengthened depending on the emotional context at the time of recall. That research is ongoing. But here is what it does not change. The mechanism behind the 3 a.m. replay is documented, reproducible, and running in your brain tonight, whether you are aware of it or not. This is not a malfunction. This is the feature working exactly as designed, processing your unresolved emotional inventory, while the regulatory systems that would otherwise filter it are asleep. Tell us in the comments, what is the memory your brain returns to most often at night? We read every one, and the patterns people describe shape what we cover next. Now, here is what connects directly to what we just covered. Everything we described about the amygdala, the threat tagging, the emotional charge, the reprocessing loop, runs on the same system that governs something that happens to you every single day, in daylight, when you're fully awake and trying to function normally. It fires at exactly the wrong moment. And it has a name. That is next. And it fires at exactly the wrong moment, in daylight, when you are fully awake and trying to function normally. If the 3 a.m. replay is something you experience regularly, the same memory, the same emotional charge, returning on a loop, leave the word loop in the comments. The pattern of what people describe shapes what we cover next. This topic generates more responses than almost anything else we have covered. And the specific memories people mention are more consistent across strangers than you would expect.